Boldwood presents Good Neighbours, written by Mary Grand and read by Karen Cass. The moral right of the author has been asserted. This performance is owned by Boldwood. Author's note. Yarmouth is an actual harbour town on the Isle of Wight. Some details of the geography of the town have been changed to suit the story. For example, if you visit, you won't find Harbour Close, nor White's, the Gallery, the Vets, or the hairdressers, which are all completely fictitious and not based on any actual businesses. In the same way, all the people in this story are completely fictitious. Cowes, too, is a real place, but the streets which feature in the novel are entirely made up. Prologue. Saturday, the 18th of February, 2017. I sat in darkness, my hand shaking as I held out the match and lit the black candle on the altar. On a piece of paper I wrote the name Ruby Moore, born February 1987, and then pinned it onto the small doll, the voodoo doll. Twiggy legs and arms, blue silk dress. I'd attempted to take any sweetness away from it with its face, carving out hollow, sightless eyes and a thin, cruel mouth. Picking up the voodoo doll, I said the words, loud and firm. The pain you gave me will come back to you 100 times worse. You are cursed. I repeated the words, conjuring up as much hate as I could. A voice whispered at the back of my head to stop, to step back, but I pushed it away. No, I had to concentrate. The more hate I released, the more effective the curse. Slowly I picked up black-headed pins and pushed them into the doll, then carefully placed the voodoo doll inside a black cardboard coffin and sealed the lid. I wrapped the box in a piece of black silk, placed it in a drawer, and locked it. Sitting back, I slowed my breath, stared at the candle as the wax dripped down the side. Finally I leant forward, placed my hands over the crystal bowl containing black salt, and closed my eyes. It was done. Chapter 1. Saturday, the 6th of May, 2017. Nia sat out on the deck, huddled in her seat, the sea breeze cold on her face, surrounded by excited children and harassed parents, holiday-makers heading to the island. Although she was aware of their shouts competing with the gulls screaming above her, the smell of the sea mingled with the ferry's engine that was chugging, she felt strangely detached. Her phone pinged a message. It was from her husband, Chris. Glad the car is sorted. Safe travels. Miss you already. Nia stared at her phone. When her aunt, Gwen, had suggested she come and house-sit for a month, Nia had initially turned it down. The idea of going away on her own filled her with dread. In her 20 years of marriage, apart from the occasional night away, she'd always been with Chris. In any case, surely nothing could be solved by running away from her problems. However, Chris had agreed, in fact encouraged her, and she'd reluctantly said she'd go. And so she was sitting on the ferry with her dog, Romeo, and as much luggage as she could manage on her own. Nia leant forward, rested her chin on the head of her cocker spaniel, stroked his soft orange-white ears. It's me and you, Romeo. Just the two of us now. She looked ahead, and slowly the island came more sharply into focus, and she could see the town of Yarmouth and the harbour shaped like a horseshoe, its arms waiting to embrace and welcome her. This is going to be our new home for a while, she said to Romeo. Gwen said we'd enjoy the beaches and downs. We have a whole new island to explore. There was something exciting about visiting an island, she had to admit. There were no bridges or tunnels between this island, the Isle of Wight, and the mainland. The only way to get here was by boat. If the weather was really bad, she could get completely cut off, and actually, Nia found the idea rather appealing. An announcement echoed around the ferry, summoning passengers to prepare to leave. Nia quickly took out her makeup bag, checked her lashes, touched up her lipstick, and smoothed down her black hair held tightly in a bun. She threw her rucksack onto her back, another bag over her shoulder, and picked up the handle of her wheeled suitcase with one hand, the lead in her other. The plan had been to bring her car, but nothing in her life was going to plan lately. She let others rushing to cars and coaches go ahead of her, and then gingerly made her way to the lift. Nia had quickly researched the town, described as cosy, the town time forgot, with narrow streets leading to a square with a town hall, church, pubs, cafes, and a small independent business. However, today it was very busy, as cars streamed off the ferry, rows of cars queued to go on, and in the town people spilled onto the road from the narrow pavements. From Gwen's directions, Nia knew she didn't have far to walk, and soon she arrived at Harbour Close. White, neat, clean terraced houses, tulips and daffodils standing proudly in the pots, safe and snug as a cat lying in the sunshine. Taking a deep breath of sea air, laced with Mediterranean smells of fish, garlic and coffee, she could feel her shoulders drop, her jaw relax. Gwen's house was one of the first buildings on her left. Neat box hedges in planters stood either side of the light blue front door. Even though Nia knew Gwen had only left the day before, it had the air of a house that had been abandoned. Gwen was hundreds of miles away now in San Francisco with her daughter. Nia missed her, wished Gwen had been there. A hug and some home baking were exactly what she needed right now. But she had to get on. Gwen had told her to pick up the house keys from the hairdresser's opposite. Nia had smiled at that. It seemed like a sign. Nia went over to Gem's, but hesitated at the front door. It didn't have the edge of the grey and stone salon she used to work in back in Cardiff, but it was freshly painted, with neat bay trees standing guard either side of the front door. Glancing through the large windows, she saw it was free from old-fashioned posters favoured by more traditional salons in villages around the country. Nia glanced at her reflection in the window, checked her hair again, tucked a stray strand behind her ear. Satisfied, she dumped her cases outside the salon in a way she'd have probably thought twice about back home, and went in with Romeo. Music from a local radio station played. 2 hairdressers were working with clients. The smell of hair products, the gentle buzz, mirrors, gowns, flooded her with a deep sense of loss and reminded her of the clients and their families she'd left behind. "Can I help you?" asked the woman with short, dyed white blonde hair, fashionable joggers and trainers who came over to her, smiling. She swallowed hard. "I'm Nia. I've come for the keys to my Aunt Gwen's house." Suddenly she looked down at Romeo. "Oh, sorry. I didn't want to leave him outside." "That's okay. Hello, sweetie. We love dogs, don't we?" Nia heard a gentle burr to the young woman's voice. She grinned at Nia. "I'm Jade." She nodded towards the other hairdresser. "That's my sister Ruby." Ruby gave a cursory smile, but went back to cutting her client's hair. She looked a lot less fashionable than her sister, wearing a cotton-flowered skirt and plain blouse, no makeup. However, she did have the most beautiful long blonde hair, falling like liquid sunshine, almost reaching her waist. "I live in the flat above the salon," continued Jade. "Ruby's further up the close with her husband Richie at the art gallery. We are all under strict instructions from Gwen to make you feel at home." Jade glanced out of the window at the abandoned luggage. "You've got a lot of stuff. Didn't you bring a car over?" "It was awful. My car broke down as I was going to drive onto the ferry." "Oh, God, no. What did you do?" Jade crossed her arms, leant on a shelf, ready to listen. "Well, my car was towed off to a garage in Southampton. I'll pick it up when it's fixed." "Sorry, I don't want to hold you up," said Nia, looking over at the client sitting in the chair. However, she was philosophically scrolling through her phone. Jade grinned. "Don't worry. You know, you are ever so like Gwen, what with that gorgeous Welsh accent and the black hair. You'd think you were her daughter." Nia blushed. "Thank you. People often say that. I found it really hard when she left Cardiff." I can imagine. She's settled in really well here. We're all very fond of her. I'd love to fly off to America, but not in a panic like Gwen. I know, but of course her daughter Kerry needs her. The baby is not due for another 2 weeks, but Kerry is finding it hard going. She was desperate for Gwen to go out as soon as she could. Kerry is lucky to have a mum like Gwen. You must let us know if you get any news. Jade glanced around the room with a mixture of humility and pride. Gwen said you used to be a hairdresser. I'm sure your salon in Cardiff was a lot posher than this. It's larger, but this is great. Thank you. So, this is your first visit to the island. You'll have a good time, and so will this chap. Jade stroked Romeo's head. Right, I'd better get you those keys. Jade disappeared to the back of the salon, and Nia looked around again. Unusually, among the display of the sponsored hair products they sold, there was a selection of candles, red, white and green, in beautiful shapes. She was looking at them when Jade returned. I make those, she explained. They are made of soya wax, all vegan if you're interested. She handed Nia the keys. That's the front door, back, windows and the garage. Do you need help? I can come over with you. I'll be fine. Thank you for the offer, though, replied Nia and left. Feeling rather like an intruder, Nia opened Gwen's front door. This opened directly into the living room, which contained enough furniture, books and general clutter for a room 3 times its size. Nia pictured her house back in Cardiff, a modern, minimalist executive home. They'd moved in 10 years ago. It was Chris's dream house. She smiled as she looked around and had to admit this was more her style. Nia opened the back door and held Romeo's collar as she checked for good, strong fences all round. It was a modest-sized garden, scruffy borders, a few small trees. To her left was the wall of the building that faced out onto the main road. To her right, a lower fence that separated her from the neighbour's garden, and down the bottom, a high wall that gave them privacy from the street. All was secure or high enough to keep Romeo in, and so she let him go and he rushed around, sniffing his new territory. Leaving Romeo to explore the garden, Nia returned to the kitchen. As she expected, this was far more organised than the living room. Gwen loved to bake. Nia went upstairs. The main bedroom faced the street. There was the same mixture of furniture, but she did find space had been made in drawers for her things, as well as half the wardrobe emptied. Nia started to unpack. She couldn't bear things in cases. As she hung up her pencil skirts, bodycon dresses, tight jeans and neat blouses, she saw the contrast with the riotous skirts and tops that still hung there. She smiled. There was a time when she'd worn clothes like those, but the neat, smart clothes she wore now were ones Chris liked, and she guessed slowly she'd changed her wardrobe to suit him. She arranged her shoes, 3 pairs of heels, 1 pair of old trainers, the only casual shoes she had for walking Romeo, and a pair of Wellington boots. Chris liked her to wear heels, and so, even in a job where she was on her feet all day, she had grown used to wearing them most of the time. Deciding she had to somehow make this place feel like her own, Nia took down an old suitcase from the wardrobe and started to fill it with stuff from around the room. Then set out her own few expensive cosmetics, a book and torch next to her bed. She took out her nightie, but as she did, she held it close to her face. It smelt of home, of him. Tears burned her eyes. She was here, alone. She tried to remember when she'd last spent a night on her own. Nia had not been on a holiday without Chris for the 20 years of their married life. The most they had ever been apart was when she'd gone away with Safi for the odd night, or to visit her parents. But as for doing things entirely on her own, well, she couldn't remember ever staying alone in a hotel. She'd not even eaten in a restaurant or cafe on her own for years either. Shaking off the sadness, Nia went downstairs to be greeted by Romeo running in from the garden. She opened one of the bags she'd brought, took out a bowl, filled it with water, and put it on the kitchen floor. Nia looked in the remaining bags. She'd had to leave a load of things in the car, including Romeo's bed, with her own bedding as they were too bulky to carry. Me and you are going to make do and mend, as Mum would say, for a week, she said to Romeo. Don't worry, I have your food and poo bags and soft piggy. Nia then spotted a note. As she started to read, she realised Gwen wrote as she talked, and she could hear her voice, each word coated with her smooth, warm tones. Welcome. Make sure you treat this house as your own home. The appliances are all pretty self-explanatory. I've written a list of the boring stuff like bin days, etc., and left food basics in the fridge. I hope it helps you to have some time to yourself. Look after yourself. I will try to keep in touch, but what with the time difference, it won't always be that easy. Email me if there are any problems. There are lots of walks and places to visit. I promise you the island will look after you. You can breathe here, I think. It's a magical place. On one of the bookshelves is a file where I jot down some walks. You might like to look at it sometime. Just one thing, if you get a chance to befriend Ruby from the hairdresser, I'd be grateful. I've mentioned her to you a few times as I knew her mum. I am sure there is something wrong. She seems very down. Maybe as an outsider you may be able to see things that have evaded me. The main thing, however, is for you to look after yourself. Take care. Gwen. Kiss, 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 kiss. Nia thought about Ruby and her sister over at the hairdresser's. She wasn't sure how she was going to get to know Ruby. She looked quite shy. In fact, she wasn't sure how she was going to get to know anyone here, and guessed she was going to be spending a lot of time on her own. However, she couldn't have been more wrong, and at that moment, she heard a knock at the door. Chapter 2. Nia found it odd and exposing to have a front door that led straight into her living room. However, her visitor was completely unfazed and greeted her with a wide smile. It was Jade from the hairdresser's, and she was holding up a bottle of red wine. A welcome to your new home present. Nia invited her in. That's kind. Would you like a drink? Never say no. Glad I bought something decent now. Jade followed her in. Nia handed Jade a glass and they sat on separate armchairs. Is this your nipper? Asked Jade, taking in the photo of a young woman on the dresser. Nia looked at her quizzically. Nipper? Jade laughed. Nipper is an island word for children. You'll hear it a lot over here. Your accent sounds almost West Country. Did your parents come from there? No, visitors or overners, that's another island word. They often think that. The island accent is a really soft burr. I like it. Anyway, the nipper in that photo is my daughter Safi. What does she do? She's travelling before going to university. She worked in a local supermarket, trying to save some money, and now has gone with her boyfriend, supposedly getting language experience in Spain, ready for doing her degree. I'm not sure how much she's learning. She seems to be having a very good time. Lucky girl. I wish I'd gone travelling. I hardly get to the mainland, let alone abroad. And do you have a husband or partner at home? Yes, he's the head teacher of our local high school. He's very busy. Wow, that sounds stressful. It is. So tell me, Jade, have you and your sister been at the salon long? Originally, Ruby and I both worked in Sandown after we did our hairdressing courses at the college. Ruby moved over here with Richie when they got married 6 years ago. He took over the gallery and she was working with another hairdresser here. When she left, Ruby asked me to join her. It's a good salon and I get the flat above. Do you like living in Yarmouth? It's a bit dull in the winter, but I like the holiday season, meeting new people. Do you know the island? This is my first visit. I always meant to bring my daughter over to stay with Gwen, but we never got around to it. It's an interesting town. The streets are very narrow, aren't they? I've never lived in quite such close proximity to my neighbours before. The houses are so close together, aren't they? Not much gets missed. If you're lucky, I'll be the first person you see in the morning and the last at night. I never shut my curtains, and because I go to bed much earlier than Gwen, we have a standing joke that I can tell what time she goes to bed because I see her light come on. It always wakes me up. But really, I do like it. I love being so close to people. Nia noticed Jade had finished her glass of wine and poured her another one. So, who else lives here? She asked. The longest residents are your neighbours, Lucy and Ian, next door. They're our island health gurus. Ian started out as an accountant, but moved on to being an advisor on the odd radio programme. He retired early, but now he's dead excited as he and Lucy are making their name in health and fitness for the over 60s. They're on for a book deal and TV spot. I have to say, they both look amazing for their age. Next to them is White's, a brasserie place owned by Joe. He's Ruby's age. His parents set him up there. Then at the top of the close is the Vet's, run by Ethan and Elvira, who are a couple now. Coming down the other side, Richie, Ruby's husband, works in the gallery and they live above it. Next to them is a second home that is empty most of the time, and then the salon with my flat above. That's it. It's a small community. Jade put her head to one side. Are you planning to stay for the whole of Gwen's time away? She's going to be over there for a few months, isn't she? Oh, no. I told her I could do a few weeks. She'll either leave it empty or find someone else when I go. So did you fancy a holiday? Nia could see the curiosity in Jade's face. She'd prepared an explanation. I needed a break. Nia paused, could see Jade was waiting for more. I shall try and get fit, she added. Read some worthy books, stop drinking. She smiled at the glass. After this one, maybe. I'll go back a whole new me. That's ambitious. As my daughter would say, I need to get my shit together. By completely changing who you are? Despite trying to keep it light, Nia suddenly felt close to tears. It was embarrassing. We'd all like to do that, wouldn't we? She replied. Sounds exhausting, said Jade, but then her tone changed. You don't always have to be changing yourself, you know. You can learn to like yourself for who you are. I know that sounds a bit heavy, but, well, when you've been brought up in some scary religion, never feeling you could do anything right, you either go along with the idea you will never be good enough, or you fight it and try to like yourself for who you are. Nia frowned. What religion was that? They are simply called the Righteous, and they get together at the hall. It's very strict and isolated. The teachings are extremely dogmatic. That sounds the opposite of what a faith should be. I'm not religious, but Gwen is. She finds going to church a great comfort. I know, I think normal churches are, but that's not what our place was like. Anyway, I left, thank God, and so did Ruby's husband Richie. He was brought up there as well. Ruby has kept going, unfortunately. Nia bit her lip. Gwen mentioned Ruby to me. I think she was a bit worried about her. Yes, she talked to me about it, but I probably knew less than her. Gwen was one of the few people to get close to Ruby. Gwen told me she spent a lot of time with your mum, and I got the impression she became very close to Ruby during that time. She told me Ruby would have made a wonderful nurse. Jade grimaced. You're right. I'm afraid I was pretty useless in the last few months of Mum's life. She was bedbound, and every time I went in I just started crying. Ruby was brilliant. She moved in with her, sat up all night. I don't know quite how she did it. We had nurses come in sometimes, and then of course Gwen stepped in. Between them they took such care of Mum. I am really grateful. I'm sure Gwen was only glad to help. She's one of those natural caregivers. She is. She's quietly helped a lot of people in the close. She's a kind of mother hen to us all. And, as I say, even Ruby turned to her. But Ruby hasn't confided in her lately. Since Mum died, Ruby has gone even more into herself. Losing a mum affects us all in different ways, doesn't it? Yes, I agree. I lost my mum a few years ago. It's very hard. It is. They looked at each other, but neither spoke, choosing to keep their pain to themselves. They both knew that grief for someone so loved was precious and not something to be spoken of lightly. Jade, in an apparent complete change of subject, asked, Do you like swimming in the sea? The sea? I've not been in the sea for years, and then it was only paddling with my daughter. You must come with me one morning. I go when I can. I don't know. I'll think about it. Jade stood up. I'll let you settle in. She looked closely at Nia. It's good to have you here. Take care. She paused and laughed self-consciously. Sorry, I don't know why I said that. Things have been a bit weird lately, a kind of sinister undercurrent, if you know what I mean. She laughed, but it was forced and over loud. Sorry, too much wine. Now come along to White's tomorrow evening. We all go about 6:30, and it will give you a chance to meet everyone. Of course, Gwen always brought along some cakes. No pressure, though. Nia went with Jade to the door, glanced out at the close. Jade's words had been unsettling. She didn't believe it was just the wine speaking. Could it really be true that things weren't quite as idyllic here as first appeared? Later that evening, Nia took Romeo out for a final walk. The streets were quiet now, with light from the pubs, but few people wandering around. In the distance, she could see the lights of the mainland, a vast dark sea stretching between them. On either side of the entrance to the pier were small shingle beaches, and Nia took Romeo down. Back in Cardiff, she realised, she'd stopped walking anywhere alone at night. Her final words to her daughter whenever she'd gone out at night had been to ring her or get a taxi home. And yet, standing here, she felt no fear. She'd forgotten how much she loved being by the sea. Slowly she found her breathing sinking with the waves, coming and going as if they were healing her in a way all the mindfulness CDs and videos never had. She was confused about so many things, but one thing was certain. At that moment, she was glad to be here, and glad to be here alone. Before she left, she took a photo, which she sent to Safi and Chris with the message, "I'm on the island." Later that night, she went up to her room. She decided Romeo could sleep on a cushion next to her. She had a quick chat with Chris to say goodnight, and then went to shut the curtains. To her surprise, she saw Jade opposite, waving at her. Nia smiled and waved back. What could have felt intrusive was actually a comfort. Her window was open, and she could smell the remnants of chips from the pubs, sense the cold sea air, the sky now black, the stars bright. She heard the heartbeat of the waves, quietly lapping in the distance. The hint of a warning earlier from Jade made no sense now. Chapter 3. The sun shone through the thin curtains, and Nia sat up. It was 7:00, but she couldn't stay in bed later than that, even on a Sunday. Back home, she'd have allowed herself a leisurely breakfast, read the papers, walked around the park and lake opposite her house. Chris had always worked through the weekend, always been ambitious. It was how he'd ended up as head teacher. But Nia had never been like that. When her daughter Safi had been younger, it had been their day. They'd go to a museum or art gallery in the town centre, or drive to Barry Island and paddle if it was sunny. Nia saw a text on her phone, another from Chris, and sent a quick answer. After this, she showered and sat at the dressing table to do her makeup. It took time, as she always liked to face the day fully made up. She had been doing her heavy, smoky eye makeup in the same way for years. Chris liked her eyes this way, a lot of mascara, eyeshadow and thick eyebrows. She combed her hair back into a tight bun, gave herself a quick smile, slipped on her old trainers, went downstairs and took her coffee and toast out into the garden, where there was a small metal table and matching chairs. It was a dry, crisp spring morning. Blue sky dotted with wispy clouds, just enough warmth to sit outside. The garden was a bit wild, but there were spring flowers peeking through the borders. Sparrows shot in and out of the hedges. "Morning." The voice startled her. Looking towards the fence, she saw an older man with the sparkling white smile, thick, well-cut grey hair and bright eyes of an afternoon quiz show host. "Oh, hiya." "You must be Nia. How charming to meet you." He gave a deprecating shrug. "I'm Ian Robson." He paused, awaiting a response. "Of course, Jade told me you were on the radio. You have a book and TV deal on the cards?" The smile broadened. He was clearly flattered.
"It's nothing, really. Now, my mission here is to extend a warm invitation to lunch with Lucy and me. We are, of course, vegetarian, but I can promise you a great meal."
"Thank you very much. Can I bring a bottle?" He gave a mock look of horror.
"Please don't worry. Just bring yourself. We'll see you about 12:30.
At that moment, Romeo came running out of the house. Ian was ecstatic.
A cocker spaniel, my favourite breed. Hello, you.
This is Romeo. My daughter named him.
Fabulous. What a handsome fellow. Now, that colouring is orange roan, am I right?
Dead right.
He is, of course, invited to lunch.
You're sure?
Of course.
Nia thought it best to take Romeo for a long walk before the lunch. As she left the house, she saw Ruby walking past. She was in similar clothes to those she'd been wearing at the salon, but today she wore a headscarf. Hiya, Nia said. Ruby gave the fixed smile. Good morning, Nia. I hope you are settling into your new home. Thank you, yes. It's a lovely morning. Are you off somewhere? To the hall. It's where my religious group, the Righteous, meet. Of course, Jade told me about it. Ruby sniffed. It's not as awful as she makes out. She then seemed to relax her shoulders. Her voice softened. Have you heard from Gwen? I hope everything is going okay for her daughter. She was such a wonderful help with Mum. I can imagine, and I know you spent a lot of time caring for your mum as well. Gwen said you would have made a very good nurse. Their eyes met, and Nia saw a kind of desperation in her eyes. Gwen said that. I never felt I was doing enough, you know. I kept feeling I should give up work altogether. I kept thinking if only I'd prayed harder, lived better, then maybe Mum would have been healed. She paused, and Nia felt a wave of pity for her. You must never blame yourself. You did everything you could. Ruby shrugged. I wish I believed that. I disappointed Mum in some ways, and that can only have added to her heartache. She looked down the road, shook her head. Anyway, I must be off. I assume someone has invited you to White's this evening? They have. I'll see you there. Ruby walked off down the road, and Nia followed behind her with Romeo, and then turned left towards the harbour. She kept well away from the edge of the harbour, glancing occasionally at the white yachts jostling side by side. It was quiet, and so far she'd only passed the occasional dog-walker. However, she did see a good-looking young man walking along the pontoon, clearly having left a yacht. He had a large carrier bag in each hand. On seeing Nia, he smiled and greeted her with a polite, "Good morning." Nia eventually turned back, took a short walk through the town, and arrived at the entrance to the pier. Nia had never been along a pier that was so quiet. No attractions, just a long row of planks of wood joined by nuts and bolts with a high metal rail either side. At the end she could see a small shelter, some fishermen, and she began to walk along with Romeo, his nose twitching, taking in the smell of sea, fish, and seaweed. The sea was calm, and to her left she could see a ferry approaching. People were out on deck. Some waved excitedly as they approached the dock. As she strolled along, it struck Nia that piers were a strange idea. Long walks that took you nowhere. She wondered if anyone had thought of carrying on laying plank after plank until they reached the other side. Before going back to the house, she went into the grocer's. There were the basics, but also fresh loaves of soda bread, local honey, jars of olives, and a large variety of cheeses. The range of wine was impressive, and Nia realised it was a shop that catered as much for the yacht owners as the locals. Apart from a few things for herself, she decided that despite what Ian said, she wanted to take a gift. She walked up and down the aisles. Her usual standbys of wine and chocolate she guessed wouldn't be what they would like. However, she found a gift set of locally made condiments, hoped they were acceptable, and took them to pay. "Good day," said the woman behind the till, then, screwing up her eyes, "Now I'm guessing you might be Gwen's niece who has come to stay." Nia smiled. It reminded her of going into the village shop at home. "I am." "Welcome to the island. Gwen asked us to have a loaf put by for you. Do say if you need anything. So, how are you settling into the close?" "I only arrived yesterday." "It's a very tight-knit group there." She held up the condiments. "A gift?" Nia smiled again. "I've been invited to Sunday lunch with my neighbours, Lucy and Ian." They'll like these. Expensive taste. Lucy and Ian only buy organic. Spend a fortune on a few carrots. Don't go expecting a nice bit of beef and Yorkshire round there, though. That's all right. I eat anything. Just as well. They have a book coming out soon, you know, and apparently there is talk of a spot on one of these morning programmes. Keeping fit when you're older, that kind of thing. Ian is loving it. Always likes to be in the limelight. Nia headed back, changed into a pencil skirt, tights and heels, and set off to meet her neighbours. The door was opened by a petite, attractive woman, expensively made up, with beautifully styled, shoulder-length, glossy brown hair. She wore skinny jeans and a white T-shirt, Burberry silk scarf and high heels, and Nia guessed she must be a few years younger than her husband. Lucy smiled shyly, held out her arms, but not wide enough to embrace. "I'm Lucy. Welcome to the Close." She placed her hands on Nia's shoulders and air-kissed her on each cheek. As she did, an expensive fragrance wafted over Nia. "I recognise your perfume," said Nia. "Is it romance?" "Well done, yes. I love Ralph Lauren perfumes." Nia handed Lucy the condiments. "A little something." "Perfect. Thank you so much," Lucy replied with a measured smile. She had the charming phrases of her husband, but there was a feeling of her holding back. She glanced down at Romeo. "Ah, a dog." "I can take him back." No, Ian will love him. Come in." Nia followed Lucy into the house. It was frighteningly white and clean, with framed collages on the wall, crystals scattered around on surfaces. Nia was glad to walk quickly through the living room to the kitchen and let Romeo loose in the garden. Lucy came out and offered her a glass of chilled, sparkling elderflower cordial. "I saw you arrive yesterday. You don't have a car?" Nia explained what had happened. "What a nuisance for you. When you collect it, at least you have a garage. Like you, we only have one car. Our garage is perfect for us. Ethan and Elvira have a space beside the vets for their cars, but Joe, Richie and Jade have to use the public car park over the road." Nia felt unreasonably smug, as if she'd joined an exclusive club. "Gwen told me you've come for a rest." Life sounded as if it had become rather complicated. Nia pressed her lips firmly together, and Lucy quickly added, "Of course, all of that is your business. Gwen is no gossip. I've not heard anything from Gwen, have you?" "Not since I arrived." "I do hope all is well with her daughter. We are all very fond of Gwen." Ian appeared. He put his arm around Lucy's shoulder, and it emphasised the difference in their height.
"Nia, I thought I heard your voice. Glad you brought Romeo with you. Lucy is a bit scared of dogs, but I'm hoping she'll get used to them. I'd love a Labrador one day. I could take him out running with me."
He kissed his wife gently on her head. "I'd better get on with lunch," said Lucy. "You take Nia through to the garden." The garden was very tidy, with raised beds for vegetables and herbs.
"We like to grow some of our own produce. You can be sure, then, of the provenance," said Ian. "It's one of the things we promote in our new books."
Nia felt she was being either preached to or being sold the book, and was grateful when she heard the ring of the front doorbell.
"Ah, there's our other guest,"
said Ian. They sat and waited while Lucy answered the door. Nia heard exclamations, greetings. The man's voice was low and rich. She wondered who it was. Chapter 4. Lucy came into the garden with the guest. "Nia, this is Ethan," she said, gesturing to Nia as if she was some kind of exhibit. "We asked him along as Elvira, his fiancée, is off seeing a friend, and we thought he could do with a decent lunch. He is always working." Ethan, with his messy light brown hair and stubble on his chin, despite obviously never looking in a mirror or giving any thought to his appearance, was very good-looking. "Ethan, Nia's home is in Cardiff. Didn't you go to university there?"
"I did,"
said Ethan.
"How is Cardiff?" "Let me get you a drink, Ethan," interrupted Ian. "Something soft would be great. I'm on call."
Ethan sat down, and his face lit up at the sight of Romeo, who had come running to him. He knelt down and made a fuss of him.
You can smell all the other dogs, cats, rabbits, horses, and everything else in my life,
said Ethan in a calm voice that somehow summoned up a look of complete adoration from Romeo.
Ethan is our vet in the practice up the end of the close,
explained Ian, coming out with a glass of lemonade.
I'll leave this with you. Go and see if I can help Lucy.
Romeo flopped down beside Ethan.
What do you do in Cardiff?
Nia shrugged. I was a hairdresser, but I'm having a break at the moment. Ethan sat back.
How interesting. So where in Cardiff do you live?
A village, well, more like a suburb of Cardiff now, called Whitchurch.
No way, I know it well.
No. Are you Welsh then?
No, I'm Ireland born and bred, but I moved over there for a few years with my wife to attend university, and then moved on to Bristol, where I studied to become a vet. I had a friend when I was in Cardiff who had family living in Whitchurch.
That's amazing. So, what degree did you do?
Chemistry.
My husband read chemistry in Cardiff as well, and then he went into teaching. He's a head teacher at a large comprehensive school now.
Wow, that's impressive. It must be stressful. Give me animals any day. So, do you have children?
One girl, Safi. And you?
I have a son, but don't see much of him, unfortunately. My wife and I are divorced, and she's miles away now, moved up north.
I'm sorry, she began, just as Ian appeared and called them in for lunch. In the kitchen diner, a banquet was laid in front of them. The large oak table was covered in a beautiful white lace cloth. Crystal glasses caught the light. The dinner service was light blue Wedgwood. Vintage silver cutlery was arranged next to their plates. Candles matched the green foliage of the expert flower arrangement in the centre of the table. I'm sorry we're eating in here, said Lucy. Ian wanted to be in the town here, so we had to settle for this little cottage. We do have a place in Surrey as well, but now Ian has retired, we are tending to spend more time here. Nia looked around nervously for Romeo, but he had slipped in beside Ethan and settled next to his chair.
Now, we have a locally made apple juice to go with a wonderful vegan Wellington, the pastry made with milled flour from Calbourne over here, and the filling all from our garden or the farm shops.
Lucy tutted. That's enough, Ian. Now I do hope you all enjoy it. Ian poured red wine into 3 of the glasses. Lucy brought a bottle of sparkling water to the table, went to pour some into Ethan's glass, but missed the edge and spilt some onto the table. Ian jumped up.
It's okay, Lucy.
He found a cloth, wiped it up, joking.
No point crying over spilt water.
Nia could see Lucy was close to tears, and so she followed Ethan's example and started to serve herself from the dishes on the table. Soon Lucy turned to Ethan and asked, How are the wedding plans going? Getting engaged in January? The wedding is in June, isn't it? You've not given yourselves much time. Ethan scratched his chin.
I'm just starting to realise that.
You could look more excited, said Lucy. You're not having second thoughts, are you? Ethan smiled.
Of course not. It's nothing like that. Just the cost. Doing things so quickly we didn't have time to save, and everything has to be paid for up front. What has surprised me is how many people are asking Elvira for cash. I didn't think anyone handled cash now. It sounds very odd to me, said Ian. Also, you need to be frank with Elvira. I know how the costs of these things can run away from you. Put the word wedding in front of anything, and it seems to treble the price.
Ethan shrugged.
I know, but I want Elvira to have the wedding she's always dreamed of. You are such a softie, Ethan,
Ian teased, then turned to Nia.
Gwen told us you were a hairdresser, but I understand your husband is a head teacher.
Nia gritted her teeth. Even absent, her husband had managed to upstage her. Yes, he has a very stressful job. And you have children? Asked Lucy. One daughter, Safi. She's over in Spain at the moment with her boyfriend, but planning to go to university in September. How wonderful, said Lucy. I saw our local hairdresser Jade tottering out from your house yesterday. I'm sure she has been filling you in on all of us."
Ian laughed. "You'll soon learn there is no private life here. We're so physically close, you can't help but see everyone's comings and goings. Jade and Ruby do all our haircuts, and we all have a good natter."
"I think it must be lovely to be part of a close community like this."
"Yes, we are very fortunate,"
said Ian. Lucy laid her hand on Ian's. "And they are very fortunate to have you." She turned to Nia. "Ian is always helping people out with their money problems. Ian has probably seen over everyone's books at some time or other, and, of course, he never charges."
"Of course not," said Ian. "It's a hard time to be running any kind of business, and I'm only too glad to help. I was only up at Joe's the other night. Oh, Ethan, Elvira seemed a bit concerned about some of the bookkeeping. She wanted me to check the vet's credit card usage was being correctly accounted for."
Ethan scowled.
"I know about this, and I agree our present accountant is not addressing this. However, I also told her that I was taking on an accountant that specialises in veterinary work, and that it would all be sorted out soon. There was no need to be bothering you about it. I really don't mind. No, really, Ian, it is all in hand."
Ian lifted up his hand.
"Of course, sorry, I was only trying to help."
Lucy patted his hand. "Of course you were." She looked around at Nia. "Ian is very generous with his time, helping people around here. He's spent hours lately teaching Jade about the basics of bookkeeping for the salon and things."
"She's a good pupil. I admire her. What with renting out a property as well as running the salon with Ruby, it's impressive for a young woman of her age. She and Ruby work hard. They deserve to succeed."
"I'll give you that. Jade is doing well, and Ruby has to be the best hairdresser I have ever had. However, you have to be careful what you say to her. She interferes in things that are none of her business. I've seen a different side to her in the last few months. First after the accident, and then again lately." Nia caught the sharp edge in Lucy's voice. Animosity. "What accident was that?" Nia asked.
"Ruby and I had a little bump, that's all," said Ian. "It was nothing. I like Ruby. She means well."
Nia caught Ian sending Lucy an anxious look, and in an effort to lighten the atmosphere, she said, "You two have so many plans. It sounds very exciting."
"It is," said Ian. "We have a lot to share. Lucy and I are fitter now than we were 20 years ago."
"That's impressive," said Nia.
"This book, and particularly the TV spot, could be fantastic opportunities," said Ian.
Nia glanced at Lucy, whose lips trembled as she smiled. "Ian will be very good. Of course, he is used to being on camera and talking on the radio."
"And you will be great," said Ian. "If we get this, the possibilities are endless. My agent was saying that we could consider clothing, food, franchise. This could be huge."
His eyes were bright with passion and excitement. Ethan grinned over at Nia.
"I daren't tell these two that yesterday I had 2 sausage rolls heated up in the microwave for my lunch and takeaway burger and chips last night."
Nia laughed, and even Ian had the grace to smile, but he said,
"It's about time you started coming out running with me. You're not getting any younger now. Elvira will thank you for it. I'm on my feet all day. I don't need to be running around the downs to keep fit." "Well, come swimming with Richie and me on a Sunday evening." He turned to Nia. "You're very welcome to come any Sunday. A friend of mine in the TV business has a house over here, close to Fort Victoria. It's a massive place, and out the back he has this huge pool and a gym. Richie and I go there most Sundays. My friend is hardly ever there."
"It sounds amazing."
"Any time you fancy it. We go about 10. I know it sounds late, but I love swimming at night. And it's a good time for Richie, as Ruby goes off to her night work for a charity then. Just come along. You can't miss the house. Turn off down to the fort. It's on the right. It's called Mare Visum. Latin, you know."
"Thank you. Although I usually spend my Sunday evenings with my feet up watching TV."
"Sounds my kind of evening,"
said Ethan. But then his phone rang, and he got up from the table to answer it. He returned quickly.
"I'm afraid I'm going to have to go. I have an emergency coming in. He kissed Lucy on the cheek. Lovely to meet you, Nia. Try and come to White's this evening about 6:30. Everyone from the Close should be there. Turning to Lucy, he said, See you later at White's, and thanks for a wonderful lunch.
As they were clearing up, Nia looked more closely at one of the collages on the kitchen wall. It was a seascape of blue silks, and the frame was made of driftwood. This is lovely, she remarked.
They're Lucy's work,
said Ian. He turned to Lucy.
Why don't you leave this to me and take Nia upstairs and show her your craft room?
Upstairs, Lucy took Nia into a room dominated by a long table with neat piles of materials in different shades of blue, and in one corner a heap of driftwood. Lucy rushed over, picked up a pair of glasses, a bottle of her perfume, and some rough paper, and as she shoved them into a drawer, she mumbled, Sorry about the mess. It all looks very organised. Lucy swung around. Sorry? What? I was saying it all looks very organised to me. You're so clever. You make the frames as well? I try to. I enjoy working with the wood I find on the beach. Richie helps me sometimes. It's lovely to work with someone. It's quite lonely working all the time on your own. I used to belong to a craft group, and one of the women there showed me how to do it. It was great. We'd meet in Newport every Saturday evening and would all swap ideas.
But you don't go now?
No, I left the group in February. We have everything taking off now with the fitness work, so I felt something had to go. Mind you, I did lead a few sessions with the women in the Close in February. The weather was miserable, and Elvira had asked me if I could teach her to make little favour bags for her wedding. I decided it would be fun to ask Ruby and Jade around as well, and we had a lot of fun making things. Elvira naturally concentrated on the bags, but Jade made some lovely little frames from driftwood, while Ruby made some beautiful little mobiles, hanging shells from them. I think she sold a few at a sale for the charity she works for. It was lovely to share your skill like that. And what about your pictures? Do you ever sell them? Yes, Richie kindly allows me to sell some of the pictures at the gallery. It's a wonderful space. You must visit. His paintings are stunning. He's very gifted. He's building up a very good business there. He's fortunate to have such an amazing location. That's because his dad supports him. He's very lucky. I'm very fond of him. As I say, he comes round sometimes to help me with things like framing. I try to cook him a nice meal occasionally to say thank you. Jade was telling me Joe's parents set him up at the brasserie here. White's, I think it's called. That's right. But how else are these young people meant to get a business off the ground nowadays? Joe's parents are nothing like as well off as Richie's dad, but they're lovely people and adore their boy. Nia glanced around the room again. You are so talented. I'm not at all creative. Don't underestimate yourself. Being a hairdresser has to be one of the most creative professions, and it's important. My weekly visits to the hairdresser are a real treat. To sit and be fussed over, chat about your problems. Well, it's a bit like therapy, except you also come out with your hair looking good. Nia grinned. That's a great way of describing my job. She picked up a large piece of rose quartz. I noticed these around the house. Do you have them as ornaments, or do you believe in their powers and that sort of thing? They definitely make a difference to my life. That one brings me unconditional love. If I've been feeling down, it really helps. Lucy picked up a pretty yellow-orange stone. I keep this up here. It's sunstone, helps with my creativity. Nia picked up a smooth black stone. This is onyx, isn't it? It is. I have one in every room. It's for protection, you see, as many of the darker crystals are. This crystal can wake up your inner confidence. It's good for self-esteem. Lucy replaced it carefully on the table. Ian thinks it's nonsense, but, well, we all need to find help where we can, don't we? They returned downstairs, where Ian was waiting with Romeo. It was clearly time to go. Thank you so much again, said Nia.
Any time you need anything, you know where we are, said Ian.
As they all walked towards the front door, Lucy appeared to stumble, and Nia grabbed Romeo, worried he'd got under her feet. "I'm so sorry, he gets too excited when he's leaving the house. I should have put his lead on sooner," she said, and quickly attached it to his collar.
"Don't worry," said Ian. "We're not used to having a dog around."
Nia thanked them again for the meal and returned home. She let Romeo out into the garden and started to inspect the borders. Maybe she could do something like plant a small herb garden for Gwen, a way of thanking Gwen for letting her stay there. However, she'd need advice. At that moment, she thought she heard voices the other side of the fence and went over to see if Ian would be able to help her. As she approached the fence, she could hear Ian.
"All I'm saying is that you need to be careful what you say."
"I had to prepare, Nia. We have no idea what Ruby could say to her."
"That's just paranoia. She won't be talking to a stranger about all that stuff. Everyone has forgotten about it. Don't go dragging it up."
Nia frowned. What a strange thing to say. What were they so worried about Ruby telling her? Chapter 5. After her walk with Romeo, Nia started thinking about the evening ahead. She'd imagined a largely solitary visit here, although of course she planned to have a few chats with Ruby and pass on impressions of the close to Gwen. However, despite it only being her second day on the island, she felt herself drawn to the people here and intrigued by their lives. In a way, it was refreshing to have a distraction from her own problems and to be among people who knew nothing about her. Nia remembered Jade's comments about Gwen's baking and wondered about taking cake that evening. However, although it had been acceptable for Gwen to take food into White's, she wasn't sure if the owners would mind her doing the same. She decided to take some in her bag and see how it went. As anticipated, the kitchen cupboards were well stocked, and she found the heavy iron griddle on which Gwen had taught her to bake Welsh cakes and crempog. She decided to make the crempog. Small, Welsh thick pancakes for that evening. There was something comforting about standing in the kitchen, mixing up the batter, with Romeo now curled up on a blanket on the floor. After leaving it to rest, she dropped the batter, a tablespoon at a time, onto the heated griddle, turning each over as it turned golden brown. As a reward for her labours, she made herself a cup of tea and allowed herself one of the warm pancakes thickly spread with butter. After this, she had the courage to find her phone and turn it back on. There were more messages from Chris, which she replied to, as she had before, that she needed time to think, and that she would talk to him soon. Safi had also messaged, but seemed to accept at face value her mother's need for a break. Later, with the pancakes neatly packed in a tin, Nia left the house to walk up the road to White's that evening. It was still light, a dry, chilly spring evening. She changed into jeans but kept her heels. White's was in the left-hand corner of the close and stood at right angles to the veterinary practice. The front of the brasserie featured enormous windows, the wooden frames painted a stylish grey. Nia hesitated at the door. Usually Chris would walk in front, make the entrance. Taking a deep breath, she pushed open the door and went in. The room was tastefully decorated, with sofas as well as dining chairs, and tables with chic green star-shaped candles. Nia could imagine them serving good coffee and wraps in the daytime, and then tapas and light plates of food with a glass of wine in the evening. Nia spotted Lucy and Ian sitting with others at a large, low table covered in small bowls of nibbles. Ian waved her in enthusiastically. There was no turning back. She approached the bar, situated at the far end of the room, and found the young man she'd seen at the harbour. He gave Nia a wide, confident smile.
"You must be Nia. I'm Joe."
"Oh, you've heard about me."
"We're very close here. Look after each other. I promised Gwen I'd keep an eye on you."
Nia laughed. She said the same to Jade.
"Good. Right, now, what can I get you?"
Nia gave a slight cough. "I'll have a glass of red. A Merlot?" Joe poured her a glass and handed it to her.
"It's good to have you here, Nia."
To Nia, he had the air of a younger person acting the part of a host. However, Nia realised that even at the age of 40, she was starting to find people looked young for their position, be it a doctor, dentist, or teacher. "Thank you very much, Joe. I saw you coming off a yacht this morning. Is it yours?"
"I wish. No, it's owned by a friend of mine. I'm not in that league."
"This place is great."
"Thanks, yes. It's starting to take off now. It takes a year or two to start bringing in the returns. Is it Cardiff you're from?"
Again, Nia felt everyone here knew a lot more about her than she did about them. "That's right. There are certainly a lot of places to eat and drink down there now. The student population is huge. It's changed a lot." She could see someone waiting to be served. Joe tactfully said,
"I see Ian's been holding a seat for you. I'll come and join you all in a minute."
Nervously, Nia leant forward. I heard Gwen used to bring cakes on a Sunday evening. I brought some, but of course if you'd rather I didn't."
Joe laughed. "Of course I don't mind. We don't serve food on a Sunday evening, and it cheers us all up. I shall look forward to them."
Nia went and took her seat between Ian and Ethan, but as she did, the others stopped talking, which was rather disconcerting. She was suddenly aware of feeling too formally dressed. Opposite her sat Jade in her casual clothes, and Ruby wearing the same skirt as the day before, with a chunky knit cardigan with wooden buttons slung on the chair behind her. A hemp shopping bag hung over the arm of the chair. She sat with her legs crossed, her body turned slightly towards the young man she sat next to. Although she had a fixed smile on her face, Nia noticed her hands were tightly clasped, one hand squeezing the fingers of the other. The knuckles on her hands white. The young man who Nia assumed was Ruby's husband, Richie, looked of similar age but was far more fashionable, with thick framed black glasses, carefully trimmed stubble, his head shaved at the side with a thick wedge of black hair lying flat on the top of his head. He sat with his legs pushed together, arms tightly crossed, and he stared down at his knees. Joe came over to join them. He leant over Jade, kissed her on the cheek, then jumped over the back of the seat to sit between her and Ruby.
"Everyone, this is Nia, Gwen's niece,"
said Ian. He was back to his normal, charming persona.
"I think most of us in the close have had a chance to say hello by now. There are, of course, Lucy and me, your neighbours."
He waved his hand at Lucy, who was sitting the other side of him. Nia leant forward to send her a smile. Lucy was wearing the same white jeans and high heels as before, but had added a blue cashmere jumper and large sunglasses.
"Now," continued Ian, "this is the proprietor of this wonderful establishment, Joe. Then Ethan and Elvira. Of course you met Ethan at lunch, and now you have the opportunity to meet his fiancée and fellow vet, Elvira."
Nia took the tin out of her bag. "I thought I'd carry on Gwen's tradition." She removed the lid and put the box on the low table in front of them.
"They look fantastic," said Joe, diving in. "Gwen makes these, doesn't she?"
"She does. In fact, she taught me how to make them," said Nia, smiling.
"Brilliant," said Joe, laughing. "You really are ever so like her."
"That's what I said," interrupted Jade. "We all have a new shoulder to cry on," she added, laughing.
"And now, Elvira," said Ian, "maybe you would like to introduce yourself."
Elvira was sitting back, twisting a strand of long, rich chestnut-brown hair around her fingers. She was clearly quite a bit younger than Ethan, maybe early 30s, her eyes a sparkling blue. She had a kind of Kate Middleton look, classy jeans, white shirt and Converse trainers. "Hi, Nia. It's brilliant to meet you." The inflection of her voice rose at the end of the statement. "I'm Elvira. I know you had lunch with Ethan today, and so you'll know something about me, I'm sure. The exciting thing I have to show this evening to everyone is this." Elvira held out her left arm, dangled her hand in front of them all with a flourish. "I finally have the ring."